Record. Thank you so much for doing this interview, Robert. I've been a huge fan of your book and your work. It's a great honor to be able to get you to be interviewed. How are you doing today?
Great. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good, thank
Thanks for
you.
inviting me.
Thank you. Well, thank you for accepting this invitation. It's really cool to meet you, uh, or in online. Before I want to get in, can you introduce to yourself to the audience, please?
My name is Robert Allen Bartlett. Um, I'm a chemist. I've written two books on alchemy, Real Alchemy and The Way of the Crucible. I have a third book in preparation, but sometime later this year, hopefully. Um, Currently living in the Seattle area, actually north of Seattle, in the Tulalip Indian Reservation.
Okay.
And we have a classroom here. We teach classes each year. We go through a series of three classes: prima, uh, secunda, and tertia. We start with the plant works and introduction to alchemy, laboratory alchemy in prima, and then we continue in secunda with animal works, water works, salt works, and then tertia covers all the mineral works, minerals and metals.
Okay.
But practical laboratory setting, and we do actual work in the laboratory.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Um, with how I found your book is through the what they call it, the law of attraction, but it's or the secret.
Yeah,
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 I found, yeah, when I was spiritually awakened, I become aware that we have this the seven hermetic principles, right? And that's how I
right,
found your work.
right,
Um, and I got very interested in the history of alchemy because the secret talk about they have the emerald tablet, and I try to uh, dug deep to the the secrets or the history of alchemy. How did you get into alchemy?
I think I was born this way. I I've had a lab of my own since I was about 9. Um, I've always had an interest in alchemy. In fact, I got a degree in chemistry just so I could do alchemy better. Uh, so I've always had a lab and just continued. I looked for a long time on my own. I finally discovered the Paracelsus Research Society in Salt Lake. Uh, the teacher was Frater Albertus, and I enrolled there, studied under Frater Albertus for about 10 years. Uh, the classes there were 7 years, 2 weeks long, each class. Uh, they went through prima through septa classes. So each year for 2 weeks, you'd go there and very intense classes in alchemy. Later, I became the chief chemist at Paracelsus Laboratories and worked directly with Frater, developing mineral and metallic medicines for their line there.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, why did you write your real alchemy? What message are you trying to convey to the readers?
Well, it's actually a textbook for the class. Uh, as I taught classes, people asked me if I could write it down and make it something they could take home and read. So I sat down and wrote that, and then the other way, the Crucible, followed shortly after.
Uh,
So really, it's just a textbook for the class and an introduction to my other works that I hope to get out. I have about 40 years of collected data on analyzing, uh, say, metallic metals, different alchemical products. I've collected quite a bit of information on different processes and products, and um, the books are kind of an introduction to lead into those works that I hope to point out. Um, There's a whole work on antimony, the work on uh, distillation of metals. I have a book now I'm working on, deals with uh, the gradation of herbs. It's called the temper of herbs. And, they used to list herbs as being, say, hot in the first degree and dry in the second degree, or cold in the fourth degree and dry in the third degree, or some combination of hot, cold, wet, and dry, and an intensity. So I have current work that is along those lines, assigning those intensities to using some laboratory techniques. It's never been done. It's always been, they would take a person they would consider balanced and then give him drugs and see how it affects him. And then they would assign, it's hot in this degree or cold in that degree, how it affects the body. There's never been an empirical method of doing it. So I've been working along those lines, developing an empirical method that combines uh, the old system of medicine, Galen's medicine, with the alchemical process of separating the elements and weighing the elements and assigning degrees from there.
Okay, thank you. When are you gonna print out the books or your work?
Pardon?
I said, when are you gonna print, or you said you're working on it? When are you putting it out or like printing it out?
I'm currently working on it. Hopefully, I'll have it done by around September or October.
Hmm. Okay.
I'm about halfway through it.
Okay. Thank you. For people, what is the principle and philosophy of alchemy?
The one principle, or
Well, I mean, there's many, but if it's up to you.
well, I guess first that all of this around us is all one thing, an adaptation of one thing, and understanding how the changes and adaptation comes about is part of alchemy's search. It's a study of the true nature of reality and our place where we fit into that, and what we can do practically with that information.
How can the average person use the principle of alchemy in their life?
Apply it,
Yeah.
uh, study, study, study alchemical principles. It's a whole it's a whole paradigm of how you look at the world. It's kind of old school, but based on elements and essentials. Um, it delves into a lot of areas. I mean, there isn't an art or science or religion that alchemy hasn't touched in some way over time. So it's really a universal key to you know everything, really.
Mm. And it's also based on these seven hermetic principles, right? Because you talk about the principle in this one. And also, I was listening to one of your interview. You were talking about how we can use nature, our own law, to further our own evolution. I don't know. Do you know Bob Proctor?
Who?
Bob Proctor. He was the feature, in The Secret. No, right?
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
He basically talked about the same thing as you. He said we can use these natural laws to, let's say, for instance, because I teaches or show try to help people to understand the what they call the law of attraction or the law of vibration, right? To get results, but in the understanding that people don't understand what's the mechanic behind it, right? So basically, they're trying to teach that when you harness these natural laws, you can bring out your potential or your genius, or you know you know uh, get what you want, stuff, those type of things, right? So
Yeah.
but how can, because for me, mine is like, my goal is like to be able to interview people like yourself, and to understand what's, how can the it help people to uh, grow or evolution. So how can we use nature own law to further our own evolution?
Well, first would be self-knowledge, using the keys, um, Kabbalistic or astrological, to understand ourselves, our own makeup. We have our own balance of principles, and understanding how we are set up uh, helps us understand how we can proceed to improve ourselves, where we lack or what we need for lessons in our life, what lessons we're being taught in this life. These things can be determined from your astrological chart, for example. Um, there are other ways determining, for example, your temperament. In the old school way, you'd be um, considered one of the four elemental types: phlegmatic or melancholic or choleric or sanguine, or some combination of that. Um, but understanding these keys will help you see where you're lacking, where you need to bring yourself into a balance. And from that, you'll get suggestions as far as what types of energies you're lacking. You may constantly be running out of a particular type of energies. You could supplement that with alchemical medicines. The alchemical work is about bringing our nature into balance. We all have the four elemental forces in operation within us, but not always in a balanced way. As we get our elemental balance together, then our perceptions become much more clear, and our health improves. Like the alchemists say, we want to cherish the innate heat and the radical moisture that we have. Those are our that's the spark of divine energy we have, and we have to nourish that and learn how to do that for our particular type. So by understanding our chart and where we are lacking, we can supply those deficiencies, or decrease those excesses that we tend to have. So it's really a matter of, like they say, man, know thyself, self knowledge. And these little keys, the astrology, the Kabbalah, uh, such like, help us to understand, ourselves better, and where we need to improve.
Right. Thank you. Speaking of which, uh, I want to understand this more better, because I was interested in, because I don't know much about Kabbalah. But there's two. So I think I have written down. Okay, what is the Kabbalah, and what is the what does it do, or its meaning? And one of my subscribers, she asked, but for me, I wanted to know if it's true or not. Some think the Illuminati is the Kabbalah, the Matrix, the slave system. Is that true?
No, the Kabbalah is actually it's associated with Jewish mystical tradition. It was passed down uh, orally from father to son, and nothing was written down until around the 12th century. Um, it was considered to be a very valuable gift for the eldest son to receive information on the Kabbalah. It's really summarizes philosophy, natural magics. It's a way of establishing relationships between things that don't, on the surface, seem to have any relationship at all. But you can find ways into concepts and ideas through back doors through the Kabbalah. Um, Kabbalah is connected with natural magic, I think. It's not so much, it's not just a Jewish tradition. It's become expanded quite a bit more to uh, be a system that can categorize and act as a file system for just about anything. Anything you know or think or see or do can be associated onto the tree in some way. And from that, you can establish other relationships between those ideas and other ideas that don't seem apparent on the surface.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you.
So
That's
Kabbalah allows you to take an idea and suddenly you find connections to other parts of the idea that on the surface just didn't seem to match. So Kabbalah gives you a way to have a filing system where you can make connections between things.
hmm. I've never actually thought of that. What you read in your book about Kabbalah is very interesting. I really liked it because I do book reviews and I really admire your work. And also there's a conception about occult, right? People think occult is bad, but it actually means hidden. What do you think about the word occult? Because so many of us have I mean, there can be bad, but it depend on the person, right? But what do you think about the word occult? Because there's so many negative connotation around it.
Well, occult just simply means hidden. It's it's what's hidden from our normal perceptions. That's what I mean by natural magics is that there are energies at play that we don't realize, or we do realize but don't take into account or neglect. There are things going on around us that we don't really take note of. For example, um, I recently mentioned something about ultrasound. I had this device that would translate ultrasound into audible sound. And I was walking around in the yard and in the house, and there's a whole world of ultrasound that we have no idea of. It's out there every day. Your computer is screaming in ultrasound. All your electronics, insects outside flapping their wings so much that they produce ultrasound. So it's things like that. There are worlds that or dimensions of the world that we don't really realize are there. They're hidden from us because they're hidden from our normal everyday senses, but that doesn't mean they're not there. Just like that world of ultrasound is all around us and it's going on all the time, but we don't have the sensory apparatus to realize that, so we just ignore it, and maybe it influences us at certain points. We get some strange feelings in certain points where there's a large ultrasound going on that we don't realize. Similar things like that. Astrological influences, certain earth fields, things like that, which are taking place, and we're not really cognizant of the fact. I say, like the influence of the moon. We know the moon pulls the earth. I mean, it pulls the atmosphere, pulls the water, pulls the whole crust of the earth. And so it's certainly acting on us each month. So uh, it's a cycle that happens every month, and people generally have no idea what's going on. They're just kind of caught up in the effects and they have no control over it. Alchemy allows you to understand these other dimensions and what influence they can have and how you can um, utilize that. You can surf the wave or avoid it, or depends what you need to do with that particular type of energy. But it's really coming to grips with different types of energetic influences that we generally don't have any awareness of. And
Mm.
so it's slowly coming to that realization that there are these other energies at play in our lives, and there are ways to manipulate them. And alchemy and alchemical medicines are one of those ways.
Mm. That's why they have the was it transmutation, right?
Yeah,
As you the new yeah, okay. And we're touch you were we were you were touching on the influence, of the planets. That we're gonna get there. For me, I don't know much about any because my mainly focus is on the, I guess, the principle philosophy, but I guess I'm not good. I'm not like a genius or anything. Like, what is astrology? Because you were talking about it.
astrology. Yeah. Well, astrology's been around with us for a very long time,
Right.
um, and the fundamental idea is that everything is vibrating. Um, we know that the energy goes out from the sun, and the planets absorb certain amounts of that energy, and then they reflect the excess. And each planet puts out a little bit different light because it's absorbed a little bit different solar spectrum. So what we absorb, you know, uh, there's an excess that we radiate out into space, and that's our vibration that other planets pick up on. So, for example, right now, Jupiter is absorbing a certain frequency band from the sun, and then it radiates out the excess. It's reflected out. It doesn't absorb that part, and that is the energy that we feel from Jupiter. And advancements in radio astronomy have proven that the planets are all putting out different types of energies that affect us. So everything is vibrating, and because of that, there are harmonies established between things. Certain things here have a certain resonance with different planetary energies. Um, you'd wonder how a planet so far away like Jupiter can have any influence on us. Um, but it's through resonance. Different materials resonate with that particular planetary energy, and so um, they can actually accumulate quite a bit of energy. You've seen this, they take say, like a wine glass, and you sing the note and the glass breaks. That's the power of resonance. The glass tries to keep up with that note, but it can't flex that far and shatters. Um, Materials are the same way. They have a certain frequency that they vibrate at, and that frequency is either in harmony or in disharmony with different planetary energies. Um, so, for example, copper has its own vibratory rate, and it happens to correspond with the resonant frequency for Venus. And so, Venus and copper have always had this association. They have a certain fundamental vibration that they share. Different plants, different stones, different parts of your body act in the same way, like little antennas that absorb different types of energies. And so that's the importance of understanding your chart or your astrological makeup. You understand what energies you're most susceptible to, what energies are most discordant to you, and what you need to do to bring those energies into a balance. And once you've brought yourself into a balance, then your perceptions increase. They become much more clear, and you have a truer perception of reality.
Right. Wow, you just that's oh that's really amazing what you say, because I was thinking like a whole range of things, because I was thinking about how I remember I was making coffee, right, and I was pouring hot water, and I was thinking about its vibration, because it is also a vibrational substance. Uh, for water, it's like low, but when you heat it up, it's increased into a higher vibration. And I was thinking about I pour the hot, really hot water, it start to shatter. And like you said, I was like thinking about that. That's really so basically what you're saying, that everything around us influence us, and we influence other things,
Right.
right?
And all those influences are charted out on the Kabbalistic tree. So the different influences can be understood by their corresponding relationships on the tree of life, on the Kabbalistic tree. It forms one method of manipulating and working with the energies that are astrological in nature, but they have their associations through the tree.
And also, I read the book in Kabbalah, but it's an old book. I love it. I think it's an inner power Kabbalah or something, but it talk about that we like the Kabbalah or the tree of life. It's within us, right? And that it also talk about, is it the Kabbalah and chakra the same, like the chakra system?
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, it's been related. The middle pillar of the tree of life corresponds to the chakras, with the Kether being the crown chakra and
mm,
Malkuth being the base chakra.
mm.
Uh,
And then I was thinking about, I can't wrap my I forgot what I was gonna say, but I can't get around to it. Have you since you're in also study a lot of alchemy, have you seen the Full Metal Alchemist?
I've seen it, yeah, on the TV.
Are you oh my god. Yes, finally, because I wanted to like speak on it. What do you think about Full Metal Alchemist, and the have you seen the newer the live action of it?
I never really watched it. I mean, other than snippets of it.
You think it
I
touched?
like anything that promotes the occult arts. You know, things like Harry Potter. I support Harry Potter because he brings out the occult arts in the way that I learned it. That's the occult world that I know. Uh, so yeah, I promote it. I mean, I promote anything that promotes the occult arts and interest in that, because I think there's a lot of phobias about it. You know, like you mentioned, a lot of strange ideas about the occult which aren't real.
Yeah, because I've been trying to like get, because basically I study for like long time. I dive deep, but not too deep, but I dive deep whatever that I try to break the limitation within our mind, because we create them. We listen to like people's, or the religions, right? I used to be Buddhist, right? But then I start to because I look up to this guy and he read all these stuff, and then so I start reading Hinduism. I start reading somewhat what was it? I can't remember. Uh, because Indian I can't remember, because I start, what was it, Kabbalah? No, that's not. Uh, I can't remember. But I start,
Ayurveda,
huh?
the Ayurveda.
No, no, no. Uh, I can't think of it. Come. I'm thinking, but I cannot think about it. Oh yeah, and I was reading the Wicca and witchcraft, right? People believe that witches are evil, right? But you found out that they're earth-based religion, and you found out that it's all the same. It's all where you start to see connection, right? Where they're all basically saying the same thing, that same thing as alchemy, where we can harness energy, right?
Yes,
Yes, and it's the same thing as Tai Chi. It's every single thing that people dismiss, and I think that that's why I try to destroy the myth in my head that they're not evil. It's just that the way that people portray it to be.
No, I've studied witchcraft, and in fact, I've been initiated into the third degree in the Welsh tradition. Um, the group started out of the Magical Child in New York. My wife, Karen, was a high priestess there.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I support that whole thing. Wicca, the earth religions, earth based religions. We attend various outings here, various groups. So we support all of that.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is, I'm not like I guess I love knowledge so much that I try to bring like more aware. That's why I promote books. Um, I was thinking about how I wanted to touch base on the Harry Potter because it had the Philosopher's Stone. It had the Nicholas Flamel, which he was. They say he's real, right? Uh,
Yeah.
in I read you I in has I have interviewed Dennis and he was talking about that Nicholas Flamel is real. Can you explain the whole thing about the Harry Potter and how it used alchemy or the philosopher's stone? What is like the allegory?
Well, actually, the title of the first book was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, but they changed the title for the American public because they didn't think that Americans would know what the Philosopher's Stone was about. So they changed it to the Sorcerer's Stone. There's a much richer tradition of alchemy in Europe. And so the idea of the Philosopher's Stone is pretty well known, less so here. Sorcerers, everyone knows what a sorcerer is, and a sorcerer's stone would make more sense than calling it a philosopher's stone. So they changed the name. But yeah, it's very heavily alchemical symbolized in there. There's alchemical symbols hanging on walls, a lot of lessons um, that are being taught. The whole thing about Nicholas Flamel, he was one who documented, he was a French alchemist around 1450, and he uh, he was actually a scrivener. He was someone who wrote letters and bills and things like that for other people who couldn't write. He would write out materials for them, and that was his job. But he came upon this text that somebody sold him. It was very obscure, and it took him years to figure out how to read it, but it was a process to make the Philosopher's Stone. And apparently he was successful because it's documented in France that he built hospitals, built homes for the poor, uh, gave all kinds of things to charity. And here was this poor guy who was just a scribe, and people were wondering where he got this money from. Um, in fact, the local nobles sent people to go check him out, and found that he lived very simply and really didn't have much at all. So they couldn't figure out what the deal was. But the story was that he was successful in making the Philosopher's Stone, and he could transmute gold. Um, I think later his grave was robbed or opened up, and people were hoping to find the Philosopher's Stone buried with him. Uh, but I believe the grave was empty.
Oh.
So Nick, he's still around.
What is because I'm very like I don't know much about the because I keep reading it, but what is the philosopher's stone and what does it actually or what does that do or the meaning behind it?
Well, the Philosopher's Stone is also said to be a universal medicine. We mentioned earlier how everyone has a certain elemental composition, uh, and a lot of the movement in the old medicine was to understand your temperament and use medicines to bring yourself into a balance. So the idea was that you got sick because you got an excess of, say, bile or excessive blood or excessive phlegm or excessive black bile, the melancholic humor. And they would apply medicines that would bring you into a balance. So, say you are a melancholic person, which is associated with the earth element and the black bile, which is cold and dry. And you had an excess of that, cold and dryness, so you'd want to balance it with something hot and wet. So there were medicines graded, so something, say, hot in the second degree and dry in the, or wet in the first degree. You could find medicines, herbs like that, that were listed as being hot and wet or um, cold and dry or whatever you needed to bring yourself into balance. So they would compound these medicines to bring a person into a balance. And there were certain compounds that were very common. Some of them contained, up to 60, 70 herbs. The very famous one was theriac. Theriac was a important medicine thought to cure most diseases. There was a big pomp and ceremony in most medieval uh, towns, large ones, where they would bring out the ingredients because they were very expensive, rare ingredients to make this theriac. And they would show the public that, here they are. These are the real ingredients. We're not cheating or cutting you short. So they would compound theriac on a massive scale for the pharmacies. Uh, and the Philosopher's Stone was said to be a universal medicine that would cure not only people, but animals and plants and minerals. It could cure the elemental imbalances in all three kingdoms. So you could take this one medicine for any disease and it would cure it. If you had a metal, most metals were considered to be alive as well. Um, the animal kingdom is full of life, the plant kingdom is full of life, and to the alchemists, they thought, the mineral kingdom must also be full of life. Why would nature cut that one short? So the animal and vegetable lives, but also the minerals and metals. Metals were said to be growing in the earth, ultimately to become perfect, like gold. That was their goal, to become a perfected metal. The metals we have been interrupted in their progress. We mine them out and we smelt them and we've arrested their development. If they were left in the earth, over millennia, they would mature into gold and silver. That was the idea. And so metals too were considered to have diseases. They were considered to have leprosy and various diseases that's why they corrode. Corrosion is because of their various diseases. Gold doesn't corrode. It's a perfect metal. Silver, much less so, but uh, not quite so corrodable as the other metals. So this corrosive quality in metals was considered to be their disease. And the Philosopher's Stone, able to cure not only man and beast, but minerals as well. So they would, this was the theory, is that the metal would be cured of its disease and become perfected and turn into gold, which was its original intention and goal in the first place. Um, so the Philosopher's Stone was considered to be this universal medicine that could cure all three kingdoms of any disease or imbalance in their elemental constitution, bring them into a perfect balance like gold. So for us, that would be a perfect balance. It would cause us to be permanently healthy, um, much more aware, our perceptions clear, our intelligence increased. So that's the nature of the philosopher's stone.
Mm, that's that's really deep. That's really beautiful. That's like the ultimate. Like that's why everybody wanted the people always make the Chinese movies. They're always looking for the elixir of life or something like that.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, they want to
Same
become.
in India and China. They were looking for the same thing. China developed all kinds of elixirs of immortality. That was their main bent. In India, their alchemy, same thing. They were looking for ways to bring a person into their balance, elemental balance. And they had various medicines they called rasayanas, which were rejuvenative medicines, some very similar to the philosopher's stone.
Mm, let's see. Thank you so much for that. That's really incredible. For ask because I always wanted to be an author. For anyone who wants to become an author, what is your writing process and how you get to publish it? Now you say it was a textbooks for students, right? But how do you write it and how do you get it published?
My writing is pretty obtuse. Um, I type like this. um, I start off with an outline of what I want to uh, say in the book, and then I think about it and expand on the outline. And then I actually type the outline in, and then I just start filling in sections of the outline. Some night I'll feel like writing about this, and I'll go in and fill out that section or at least a part of it. Um, it's a process. I come back and forth and change it, edit, and add and subtract. Uh, so it always surprises me that it comes together. um, but we originally, our first book, we looked for some publishers and didn't really find any. We went to Samuel Weiser, and the person in charge said they weren't interested. So we started publishing on Lulu, so you can self-publish, and that was working out really well. It's on demand, so people just order the book and they print it out for them and send it, and we don't have to do anything. So that was convenient. But then somebody at Red Wheel Weiser saw the book and they were interested in publishing, so they took it over and they publish it now. They publish both of them,
Hmm,
so
that's
they
good.
take care of all the marketing and all that kind of thing.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad that they pick it up because I really loved it. I really can you since for me I would like to know more about uh, Thor because I read it, but I can't like get a picture of him.
Of who?
A Thor, a Thoth or a Thoth or Thoth.
Thoth.
Yeah, I can't. I read him so many times, but I cannot get a clear picture of him. Can you like elaborate of who he is and what does he do?
Well, Thoth was the Egyptian god of wisdom. He invented all writing, science, mathematics. Um, there were said to be three incarnations of Hermes. Thoth was related to the Greek Hermes. So the Greeks thought of Thoth, the Egyptian god, as their Hermes. And so Hermes and Thoth have this long connection. Um, there were said to be several incarnations of Thoth. Um, first as the god, later as a god Hermes, and still later as Hermes Trismegistus, um, famous figure in alchemy. Um, but he has always been the main patron of alchemy. he was the inventor of the art. In fact, that's why it's called the Hermetic art, because of Hermes and its association with Thoth. So Thoth has been around in various incarnations, um, but mainly he's the patron saint of alchemy, really.
Mm, okay, thank you so much for that. Um, I was thinking about, can you give more, since we haven't talked much, can you give back, not give back, the background a little bit on alchemy for those who don't know what as alchemy is?
Background about alchemy.
Yes.
Um, well, alchemy has developed over a long period of time. Um, it's really the history of chemistry is the history of alchemy. It was the exploration of matter. What is all of this around us? From the early Greek philosophers. They studied in the Egyptian temples for years, and they translated a lot of that mystical information into a practical, rational system, the Greek philosophy. Um, and if you know Egyptian mysticism and philosophy, you'll see how indebted the Greek philosophy is to the Egyptian mysticism. Um, but along with the Greek philosophy, at some point, some say around 200 BC in Alexandria, Greek philosophy and Egyptian technology, because the Egyptians were technical masters at working with materials, um, and they were renowned through the ancient world that way. Um, but anyway, the Greek philosophy and Egyptian technology welded together and became a movement. They didn't call it alchemy yet. It was called chemia, because the Greeks, well, Egypt was known as Chem, the Black Land, in reference to the annual flooding of the Nile would deposit this black soil that, their agriculture was very dependent on. And so this technical arts of the Egyptian became known as chemia, or the black arts. And that's really the source of the black arts, is that it's related to Chem, which was the name for Egypt, which meant black. And so this chemia was the black art, the original black art. Um, and it was testing the philosophy. They said that everything is made of these four elements. And so if the metals are truly made of these four elements, then it should be able to shift them around and change the elemental composition of, say, copper or lead, shift it around to become the elemental composition of gold or silver. And so that was really part of the process of testing materials to see if the theory was actually working. Um, Later on, uh, after the collapse of Rome, the alchemical arts filtered into the Arabic world. In fact, a lot of the stuff we know about Plato, Aristotle, all of that would have been lost to us if the early Arab scholars hadn't taken those works and translated them into Arabic. During the medieval period, the Dark Ages, people had no concept that there was an Aristotle or a Plato or anything like that. It wasn't until around 900 that texts out of the Arabic world started getting translated, and then it started flooding the world, the Eastern world, Latin West, with books about alchemy. Now this chemia, this uh, Greek Egyptian blend, chemia, had the Arabic particle attached to it, al, so it became known as alchemia, and later in the Latin West became known as alchemy. But it's really the chemistry of the time. Um, and everyone who was, knowledgeable in materials would know something about alchemia, just like people who know anything about science today know something about chemistry, um, because it is the chemistry of the day. Um, and so these theories were well known, um, at least the background, and then various secrets popped up how to actually manipulate things to produce miraculous remedies and such. But that came later. But alchemy continued to develop up until uh, well into the 1600s. Uh, at that point, Robert Boyle and some of the early scientists like Newton, they called into question the actual nature and the number of the elements. It was obvious there were more than four, so something had to be done about how people were designating elements, and it really began the end of alchemy and the beginnings of modern chemistry. So up until about 1650, 1700, chemistry went through major changes during that period.
Huh, man, that's because I feel when you say that, I feel like it's like alchemy has so much offer to the world, and it get lost in the translation for the modern world, right? I feel.
It does, and that was partially it was deliberately done
Yeah.
because some of the early proponents for the new chemistry were against alchemists and thinking they were largely frauds and charlatans and ripoffs. They would put out disinformation about alchemists being ripoffs. In fact, during a certain period in the 1600s, the Royal Society in London, uh, they forbade discussion of alchemical topics in their meetings, even though most of the members were interested in actually involved in alchemical works. They didn't want it to tarnish this new reputation of the new chemistry, and so they wanted to put alchemy on the side light in a bad light and focus on the new chemistry that was developing. So they purposely, tried to make alchemy look like a ripoff and a fraud and a scam. Uh, and later authors, historians kind of followed suit, and it was always, the follies of our ancestors and those crazy ancients, looking for gold where it wasn't. So they made them look like idiots and had no real theory to go by. They're just greedy, trying to get rich on quick money schemes. But there's quite a bit of theory and history behind alchemy that dovetails into chemistry as we know it today, and actually a lot of other sciences.
Science.
So
Yeah, I wish that like what you said is true. I wish like the modern world they separate the whole because I know that in you talk about it in so many alchemy talk about it. There are three level of alchemy with the spiritual, the mental, and the physical, right? And the whole missing what the modern day chemistry is missing the mental and the spiritual. They're only working for the physical, right?
yeah,
And that's what it kind of said because I've because I remember Will Smith. He talked about he's the alchemist, right? There's a video on the book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, right? That's one of my favorite book. You
yeah,
have read it, right?
yeah,
Yeah, and that's what is so true. Like we separate the people as they're powerless, but they can become change. Or I forgot what's Dennis say. He said the alchemist is the art of transformation.
yeah.
Yeah, and we don't see it that way, but that's why they have quantum physics to put in together. That's what make it sad.
Well, it's funny that that you mentioned that, because quantum physics is coming back around to a lot of the ancient teachings that all of this is one thing, and things are resonating and vibrating, and we can actually have control, manipulate things on a mental, spiritual level. So a lot of the ancient principles are actually, coming to light. Um, and that's true with alchemy in general. It's becoming a popular and um, an area of study, scholarly setting, that is becoming acceptable again. It's like there's something there in alchemy that's worth exploring, and it's not all smoke and mirrors like, the historians from the 1800s would have led us to believe. Um,
Well,
there's
it
more behind it,
right.
and they're
Um,
rediscovering a lot of that, and it's becoming a legitimate area of research in modern universities.
really? Oh wow. It's I think it's also because of people how they perceive like things to be, right? Because the reason why I pick up your book is I notice that my thought, my thought alone, but also with the, my, I think you would understand where they talk about the male and female energy, right? When your thoughts and emotion, or the whole. Well, I don't know if you believe the whole Trinity, right? Where that the whole world that we looked at is nothing but a law of correspondence, right?
Right,
Where our inner world, right? As within, so without, right? Where if we change our inner world, the reflection out there, or the reflection of the world changes, right? And that's how, that's what my journey been, right? I can switch a thought, and I believe a thought, and somehow if I listen to my intuition, right, and if I took the my personal action, thing would manifest, right, and it's really incredible to see that, like I can cause coincidence to happen, like synchronicities, stuff like that, but people don't believe in that, so there's a power in that, like
yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah. We
um,
cause things to manifest.
sorry, go ahead. What you said, manifest?
We we cause things to manifest,
Uh,
and if you understand the alchemical principles, then you know how to manipulate that to condense energies to make things manifest.
how do we condense the energy? How can we like to manifest it?
Well, it depends what energies you want. There are receptacles, but we can uh, we can develop within ourselves those energies and direct them consciously. Um, a lot of the magical techniques are designed for that, developing a particular type of energy and then projecting it, um, and even causing it to become a manifestation, manifest reality. Uh,
Yeah, it's the same thing as witchcraft. Like I noticed that all witchcraft and voodoo, it's all about the energy, right? It's not about, because I think so oftentimes I think people get weirded out by voodoo, but I come to conclusion that it's all based on the subconscious energy, the psychic. People get scared of psychic too, but it's just a word for Greek for soul and mind, right? It's the mind.
right.
And yeah, thank you so much for that. Where can we find you?
Where can you find me?
Yeah, no, I mean on social media, or like that's what I mean, like social websites and stuff like that.
We're at spagyricus.com.
Okay,
We advertise classes there, and you can leave messages. And
okay.
so we,
Um,
we
yeah.
have a web presence.
What does one more question? What does success look like to you?
What does what?
What does success look like to you?
Success?
Yes.
Hmm. Success means living long and prospering.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoy your talk, and thank you so much for creating your work. Even though I'm not like as deeply into like alchemy, I'm using just for because I don't know about. I feel like I'm not good at with the chemical, right? The chemistry. I only do it for the philosophy and the alchemy because I think the history is filled with rich dynamic things that people I think people should understand. You know, it's not scary. That's why I'm trying to bring up to light.
No, it's not scary. It's fascinating. You know, the whole history of the development of alchemy through time is it's a fascinating story.
Oh, before I forget, because I had one more question, but I forget. What is because I was interested at first the emerald tablet. Can you explain what is the emerald tablet and what does it do before we go?
Well, according to the legend, there was discovered this tablet, um, large tablet in raised hieroglyphics made of emerald. And the idea was that it was an alchemically produced emerald. Part of the alchemy is being able to reproduce precious stones. Not only metals could be transmuted, but stones could be elevated to become precious stones. And the idea was that Hermes, or Thoth himself, had developed a formula to create an artificial emerald, and he cast it out into a large plate with these raised hieroglyphics, which state a summary of the alchemical work. You know, so you've heard things like "as above, so below." That's part of the Emerald Tablet. So it's really a summary of alchemical principles that have come down to us. Nothing was actually found or discovered earlier than about 800. The Emerald Tablet doesn't really show up in any written manuscript until about 800 AD. Shows up in some of the early Arabic works. Um, but the legend goes that it was, far older than that. And in fact, the hieroglyphs are said to be ancient Phoenician. So its exact origin and reality are still in question. But the legend is that it was this alchemically produced emerald that summarized alchemical works.
Mm. Okay, okay. Thank you so much. I had a thought. Did you watch the God of Egypt yet, or Gods of Egypt?
I did.
What did you think of it?
Well, if you know the history or the mythology of Egypt, there are a lot of interesting little subtle parts in there, but overall, I don't know. I didn't really. I mean, it could have gone better. But if you know the Egyptology, they had some very interesting subtle tips and points in there that most people probably missed if they didn't have a handle on Egyptology, which was it's one of my subjects I study too is Egyptology. So uh,
Mm.
it was
Okay.
interesting in that point.
No, okay. Thank you. Wait, well, I was gonna say how can they do it better, but you know. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I love it. Thank you. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.